Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to TIA's webcast, Increasing Market Share by Addressing Customer Experience Metrics. My name is Allison Crawford, Market Manager at Technology Business Research, and I'm your host for today's session. TIA's focus is to provide business research to accelerate our customer success, and the information we'll be covering today comes directly from our Telecom Infrastructure Services research program. This intensive program includes information like opportunity models, margin analysis, and competitive benchmarking, enabling a networking and mobility team to provide deeper insights into customer experience metrics, customer requirements, and the opportunity and positioning of major suppliers in the managed service market. I'd like to present some of our findings to you today and get your feedback on our information. Before I over to Michael, there are a few action items I'd like to cover. First, we'll be recording today's session and posting it to the TR YouTube channel. We encourage you to visit the channel and watch this presentation or any of the other presentations we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please add any questions or comments to the Q&A function or the chat function throughout the presentation. Mike will address them at the end of his presentation. Third, we'll send slides to everyone registered for today's session within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. Let me introduce Michael Sullivan-Trainor, Executive Analyst on the Networking and Mobility team here at TBR. Michael covered the telecom services industry for more than 10 years and is helping our clients find new opportunity and mitigate risk. Michael?
Thanks, thank you, everyone, for joining today. As Allison mentioned, I am Michael Sullivan-Trainor, Executive Analyst with TBR. I'm covering the services industry in the telecommunications and IT business for the past years, and TBR has been working to deliver market modeling and market share in the managed services and telecom information infrastructure services industry for that time as well. Today, we're going to look at managed services opportunities based on new metrics in customer experience that will allow managed services providers to drive increased market share. We'll learn about some key trends that are driving this move towards the metrics, and you will learn about what some of those metrics are. So we have to look at the market, that there are fewer and fewer new networks being built today and going forward. Learn about how that drives a stronger emphasis on retention and margin as key objectives for the service providers who are the candidates for managed services. We'll learn that services have become critical to their success to answer some of the business pressures they're facing. And then we'll spend the bulk of the presentation on how the experience metrics are the new levers of value for service providers. Before we go on to some of these topics, I want to first talk about what's happening in the telecom industry in general. And here you have a non-telecom industry example, but a very relevant one. 130 years ago, this picture depicts the driving of the last golden spike of the road industry. It's actually Promontory Point, Utah, the Continental Railroad completion in the United States, mirrored by other completions of railroads in worldwide. This situation faced during that time period by the railroad industry was that upon completion of the building of the tracks to link all the railroads, those providers of track have discovered that they really want to have a driver for business and need to turn their attention to a new business driver, not about the railroad tracks, but about the cargo that rides on the tracks. And bringing us up to the modern day, that's very much the same situation that telecom service providers are facing. They continue to complete their build-outs, essentially running out of track of network to deploy, needing to pay more and more attention to the cargo that runs across the network, namely the quality of service and the services themselves that the subscribers are partaking of the network and the reason they are subscribing. And it changes the kind of metrics and the kind of requirements service providers place upon their suppliers. So go to the next slide and first talk about the new network, few new networks point that I was beginning to make, highlighting the example of the railroad industry. In the communications industry, we're increasingly seeing saturation of the marketplace, largely through by virtual mobile networks, but certainly there's been precursors of fixed networks in most of the mature markets. So the developed markets are becoming quite saturated with multiple devices per user and very little room for growth except by trying to add capacity to existing networks. Internally, in the last few years, the hyper growth that we've seen in the developing market has begun to indicate that penetration and saturation is going to occur there in a fairly short amount of years, where we see already China has more than 40% of its enormous population penetration with mobile devices, and the pace is not slowing down. Similarly, in India and in other developing regions, the future of the growth has been for some time. Those are going to be eventual areas of saturation. So fewer new network builds. Here we see already we have 4 billion mobile phones in use out of a worldwide population, 3 billion active text or SMS users, and a very fast-growing mobile broadband environment that in the next few years is certainly going to see that 1.2 billion catch up to nearly everyone with a mobile device, also being a mobile broadband subscriber. So the extent of the networks is really coming to a head, and we're really needing to see the service providers find other ways simply extend coverage to build the business model on. So we go to the next slide. To concerns about how they can compete. As mentioned in the previous slide, that network build means that most of the subscribers are already acquired subscribers, so it's about preventing other folks from churning from your network to another network. The major factor then, we move to our second point, which is subscriber retention becomes a key market driver in order to maintain that subscriber base and even subscriber capture from competitors. We see very significant competitions being waged in many markets with enormous expenditures of CapEx simply to retain or capture new subscribers from competitors. We predict there's going to be more than $300 billion in CapEx spent in 2012, for example, the bulk of which is on network capacity increase, network density increase, a lot towards LTE, a lot in North America in particular. But the factor we've observed in the industry, and I think it's been documented now for the past couple of years, there is a revenue and traffic gap that is causing extreme pressure on margins. As we have moved to a mobile broadband environment, the amount of revenue coming in from the growth in the data business, ARPU, or that share of ARPU, is not keeping up with the growth in share traffic that the data, the broadband generates. So this is a significant concern in the industry about how to increase the ARPU for data, how to, more importantly for our talk here today, lower the cost of providing services across the network through managed services and other options in order to achieve a better margin given the gap, or what may have called the scissors effect of traffic exceeding the ability to collect revenues on the traffic. So in order to ameliorate that, the managed services is a key one. As mentioned here, other factors come into play. Operators making big bets on data services and cloud services, seeing that as an opportunity to increase the ARPU and get them into new kinds of marketplace that aren't reliant on the tracks or the network, if you will, but are reliant on the services on the network. And we see significant action in those areas and a significant opportunity for managed services in those areas as well, as they are approaching those areas with the same view that it needs to be maximize the monetization, minimize the cost, and often that's a managed services opportunity. Certainly served a lot of over-the-top competition. The pure-play cloud providers, internet providers, content providers are interfering with the perfect view of the telecom operator that says they should have the right to monetize the content passing over the network. In fact, these other firms are monetizing it at a more effective and rapid rate than they are. Another area that's putting pressure on margins. One of the big traffic drivers in the coming year is going to be video. And from a U.S. perspective, at least, cable is a crucial player in the video marketplace and increasingly placing video over IP and building a content value package around that. The telco operators need to do the same thing. At the same time, over-the-top players are offering a lot of free streaming video, so monetizing video, one of the great drivers of traffic volume, is a problem for the operators in this environment. The volume pressure is not going to let up. It's going to get more severe. So at the same time as there is an investment in ways to increase ARPU through new kinds of data services and monetizing existing data services, there is a dramatic requirement to reduce margin and increase margin rather than reduce OPEX to do so. The next slide. We've observed at the same time, our third point I want to make here, that managed services has been critical to the success of operators as they've tried to fight against some of these trends and benefit from some of them. The growth in managed services as forecast by TBRs is shown here. In fact, this is our forecast for the major segment of services that we look at in our Telecom Infrastructure Services market model. We go back to early years, and in this particular case are starting the forecast from 2010, and see the market segmented by deployment services, managed services, professional services, and maintenance services. We see an inflection point occurring in 2012 where for the first time managed services spend will become the largest segment of telecom infrastructure services spend, driven exactly by the growth trends that we are discussing. Largely how the OPEX can be monitored off the service provider or the operator books and become an outsourced contract or a managed services contract or out-tasked contract with managed services providers. We feel like trends such as cloud only accelerate the possibility this will happen. The trends to develop new ways to reduce the cost of network provisioning, given the pressure on margins, will drive this trend as well. So looking at more than $24 billion in this marketplace as a share of the total services marketplace and continuing to grow. As we point out, they were at a compound rate of 9% through the forecast period. The other factor besides the discussion margin is the increased complexity of networks, the need to merge and manage the ongoing repair and sustenance of the legworks, as well as drive new efficiencies in the more dense new networks that are being deployed. And we expect the dense network deployment to be a major theme in the coming years as well, as we look to small cells and ways to move the intensity of traffic capacity closer to the user to ameliorate some of the pressure on the greater network. So all of these things say a need for increased expertise to deal with the complexity. A lot of the OPEX pressure suggests that many service providers are going to turn to managed services as a way to solve these issues. Slide, please. So now we come to the point, major theme of our talk. Laid the groundwork to suggest that it is an intense environment of change and pressure for service providers during managed services. We suggested that some of the traditional kinds of managed services, those that involve taking off the pressure and relieving some of the complexity by bringing in new expertise, will be growth drivers for the market. There is a third one that we believe is building for managed services and other types of services as well, and it is about looking at network more as an end-to-end drive of provider of customer experience. So again, back to the earlier point about paying attention to the cars on the track on the railroad, or the traffic or the content on the network. How, in fact, do service providers deal with the need to really understand customer experience metrics to guarantee the quality of service, and what help do they need to do that? So this particular slide we have now two different slides. We're going to look at the different ways in which managed services plays into this. Here we see the market for managed services as described by the kinds of managed services that are available in a full outsourcing model, as we're suggesting here. So thinking about things on a horizontal plane, managed services that include consulting design planning, that include the managed build and integration, usually focus on managed operation for the provision of a network, for the support of the network, and then the ongoing management of capacity upgrades and optimization of the network. So in end-to-end horizontal view, the network participation from a services provider can go from the beginnings of implementing a network to the end stages of operating and managing the network for the operator. And we've certainly seen managed services contracts at each of these various phases, certainly more in the operate phase. Then we can also look at the marketplace increasingly vertically, and understand that there are a number of layers in the network that can be managed. Everything from a shared network of site consolidation and managed backhaul or managed access to those aspects of the network that can be engaged with controlling the network, so managing the network management environment. So those two layers, the network and the shared network, those kinds of environments have been traditionally where managed services played, whether it be wireless or wireline scenarios. Increasingly, the BS systems are now coming under attention as a managed service opportunity. Separate managed billing has occurred for a while in managed customer service, but to be able to use the proposition of managing the customer both from the network experience side of the equation and the relationship on billing and customer care and content side of the relationship is the nuance that is moving the marketplace more into a vertical deployment. Add that then certain applications, certain services, certain enabled technologies can be added to that on the service layer. So a complete managed services offering today can be both horizontal and vertical, going from the initiation of the network all the way to the customer experience with a given service, down inclusive of the quality of service and perhaps the billing and ongoing relationship. So the ground available to suppliers to provide managed services has never been broader, and the opportunity that operators are open to accepting managed services has never been greater because of the issues we've been talking about so far. Slide, please. That's sort of the primary slide, I think, to set us the stage for other comments here about the experience metrics. This slide just highlights where market for managed services has been. We see actually some shifts here, and we've again segmented it a bit by types of managed services. So outsourcing being the choice to outsource or out-task a portion of network, either a portion of wireline or wireless, or even a portion of the billing or service delivery. We have talked about full outsourcing, which by that we mean everything in that previous chart, horizontal and vertical. the ability to implement just a managed network operations focus, look at managed infrastructure, which is more about capacity and optimization, and then the traditional build, operate, manage model where there is a management of the network to get it provisioned, but then releasing the management of it after the early stages, after some stage in the contract is agreed. We show above the number of contracts that we've observed in that 3-year time period, January to December 2008 to December 2011, and indicate that, of course, there's been a large number of outsourcing being the largest number of contracts, and then the second largest number being the managed network operations. So those are probably the two most common and most traditional kinds. But we do see indications of new contracts across the period of other kinds of managed services, and do expect, as highlighted in the previous slide, more and more full outsourcing to become a significant play in the marketplace. From a regional standpoint, we have 3 regions shown on the right-hand graph: the Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. And as those of us in the industry have been quite clear for years, there are profound differences in how the regions have chosen to address managed services topics. That said, the process that I described, I think, are going to cause all operators to have significant managed services plays, and we think it'll only get more significant. And if we expand, again, the managed services definition from not just network operations contracts, but to the full scope we're talking about, we see a lot of plays in all regions for these kinds of managed services. The next slide, please. Okay, so here you're looking at, from the supplier side, we've seen what the service provider has as interest in the kinds of managed services that are available to them. And we've seen a little bit about what kinds of those services are most popular, which kinds of regions are. Or have recently deployed managed services. So if you are a supplier of managed services, begin to think about this new model about customer experience. It's possible to think about managed services in some high-level business model ways. And we show here 2 criteria to think of business model. Does the business model focus on scale, high-low, or does it focus on innovation? Scale criteria, the scale opportunity is pretty clear. The understanding, particularly in managed network operations, is spreading the cost of operations across a larger number of operators and utilizing common resources for those operators is the key to unlocking value in that market, and has certainly been well practiced by many of the suppliers. Very hard to achieve scale and selective outsourcing simply because there's not enough commonality. It's possible to do in individual types of services, but definitely not as a heaviest model of selective outsourcing. We see the high-value scale, mainly in network operations outsourcing, is shown here, and it is a business model, as I said, that provides a high volume of revenue and margin proposition that needs to be made more valuable by spreading it across that volume. The other dimension, though, is more relevant to our conversation today, and that is we see the innovation spectrum now going from what was key performance indicators, so list network performance and the SLA and the agreement with the operator and the managed services, does the network function the way it's supposed to according to key performance indicators. In order to achieve that model that I was talking about earlier, it's necessary to move the conversation to just talk about the network KPIs, but to go into what are some key quality indicators, that is to say, some indicators around the way the service is being experienced by the end customer that indicates whether or not the performance of the network from a customer's perspective is happening the way it should. And of course, KPIs play into KQIs, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the movement towards a KQI model requires a more innovative implemented managed service services because customarily the KQIs have existed in the areas of the network, the BSS layer, service layer, where the traditional managed network operations supplier has not played. And so integrating KPIs into a KQI connection that's further up into that vertical model is a key here. Ultimately, the way to put this all forward for the providers, they don't care about KQIs and KPIs at a C level. They care about KBOs, key business objectives. So translating all that into a proposition that says this is going to provide superior customer retention, or this is going to do something to increase the ARPU, these kinds of key business objectives built because there's new services and these services are performing at this level of quality, and that's a differentiable proposition that lets you retain subscribers, and it's supported by a network that's performing at this high level based on the KPIs. That and story then is the innovation in the network for managed services and for other kinds of services as well. So I believe that kind of innovation will be necessary to fully deploy a full outsourcing model, which is why we place it as a high innovation and the ideal proposition for the yet to be to leverage both models, and that is having a high-scaled innovation model, which is possible and maybe a future state. But this is a way in which the innovation can occur. It unlocks new revenue for the supplier and the operator because it goes beyond traditional managed service network operations and up into the others of the network, yet creates a value of integration between those two that suppliers in the telecom industry are better positioned to deliver than, say, IT suppliers who are only managing a selective task at the service layer. Next slide, please. Giving a little detail on what we mean by KPI to KQI. So here there are a few KPI examples, things that would be important to understand the network, failed transition, data speed issues, outages. These kinds of KPIs, traditional and well understood, and certainly many, many more of them in the network and required to build out a SLA for a managed service. Being able to talk about them in terms of key quality indicators is an important step. So the compilation of KPIs that really speak to what is the availability of a service for the user of a certain type of service. What is the view of impact on the customer for downtime or for disturbance in the network? What about security? Can we have quality indicators around security? These kinds of indicators that are driven by applications and application awareness at the service layer or interaction between the service layer and the OSS. These are what we're talking about when we're talking about key quality indicators. Build-up of these will lead to new kinds of service-level agreements that are the user experience with an expectation that the conversation with the operator is going to be, here is the service-level agreement around the KBO and KQIs that support it for a targeted end-user experience. And then here's the underlying KPIs that drive to that. So again, this is a place where that integration can happen that understands both the network and the service layer will be most successful here. The requirements, of course, will be openings for other kinds of opportunities, not just managed services, such as making the end-to-end data analysis is available. So there'll be an implementation of tools to extract necessary data. Now, the tools can be delivered as managed services differentiation, or they can be sold in as a licensed offer and used as a out-task or outsource. But these are different models that can go in around the software, but we believe new kinds of software will be implemented to this facility as well. And of course, it will facilitate the trends in proactive problem identification, problem resolution that we have seen in the tech support business now for the last few years, and strongly playing at the integration into the managed services business, because of course really understanding how to proactively prevent the degradation in user experience is going to be critical if you stay to a AQI and an SLA that is reliant on customer experience. So there's a bit of the new landscape that we see emerging for managed services in general in the innovation area and more broadly for the services industry. Next slide, please. So what are suppliers doing about this? Is there any activity out there in the marketplace? Well, there is activity, but it would not necessarily be clear yet that the suppliers have all gotten aboard the innovation movement or have chosen to follow the scale model. In fact, we see different strategies to revenue growth emerging. The two players that are leading the marketplace in managed services, Ericsson and Huawei, are taking a very similar model. I should be more clear. I think Ericsson has been by far the leader in managed services. This particular chart shows results for 4Q11, and that isn't necessarily a 100% representation of the annual managed services play. In fact, there's some year-end revenues, for instance, that Alcatel-Lucent collected that show it as having a very strong position in the scale of the market, but on an annual basis, it's not at the same scale as Ericsson. Ericsson's model and the traditional model is very much the scale model, as we talked about earlier, and they have been successful at practicing that, and we see Huawei as following that scale model. So I am suggesting that they tend to be more of the pursuing the scale and opportunity to continue to drive volume, go after maximum number of deals, monetize that across a concept of infrastructure to deliver the managed services. The other players are not foregoing that. However, we do see both Alcatel-Lucent and Nokia Siemens beginning to become more focused in their models, looking to try and be selective about their managed services offers, understanding that perhaps there are some challenges with achieving margin and scale. Beginning then to talk more and more aggressively about customer experience and beginning to look at that combination of qualifiers tied to their BSS OSS propositions that let them have an end-to-end delivery of quality of customer experience as part of their managed services offer and as part of their overall services and software offers. So there's a bit of a shift in industry where a few years ago most players seem to be pursuing exactly the same strategy to achieve the same ends. A lot of battling in the managed services space for network operations. We see separation beginning to occur in the marketplace based on some of the strategies. Some of it driven by economics, of course, of the different suppliers, but also driven by the company's ability to innovate. Next slide. So coming to up here, and wanted to revisit our key points. We've learned how there are a few new networks being built in the coming years, and therefore there's a need for a new kind of business focus for operators. So it's the services that are upon the networks rather than the network builds themselves. Therefore, a need for their suppliers to shift focus as well. This is on KBOs, and KBOs around retention and margin are the key objectives, supported by new metrics that can be delivered by the suppliers. Certainly, managed services are remaining critical for success. We've learned how that has been a major value in reducing their OpEx cost and offloading complexity. And finally, we've learned about some customer experience metrics that are the new levers of value for suppliers to link the proposition of network operations with service layer and key quality indicators that can be part of the differentiation in an innovation strategy for suppliers in managed services. Next slide.
Thanks, Michael. So we've had a few questions come in. I'd like to encourage anyone out there that has any questions based on what Michael just presented to send them through the chat function. Our first question is, could you provide some examples of key business objectives?
Right. I was speaking about them. The key business objectives in this very challenging marketplace are, the first one is retaining customers. So the objective is churn reduction. That's a measurable and consistent number that is being observed by operators. And so a key business objective that, like reduction, can be played back into key quality indicators to indicate the level of customer response or level of customer issue that occurs when there's network disruption, and of course can be tied back to the KPIs of the network quality itself. Another key business objective is, of course, upsell, or the ability to increase ARPU. ARPU on a particular data service is a key business objective that can be underpinned by the way in which a customer experiences a service, and perhaps even measure some of how the marketing around that service is occurring, and tying that back into the performance of the service itself. So these are a couple of the major KBOs that we think the marketplace will be focused on.
Thanks. Our section is, what regional differences with respect to managed services opportunities?
So I suggested there's a difference particularly in the recent past, where we see the managed network operations market being largely played out in Europe, with a much more significant economic pressure, as well as a much more interest in and willingness to go into managed network operations. In North America, of course, have moved in some cases to managed network operations, but there's some union issues and other issues that prevent a full scope managed network operations play. How we think that the combination now of the kind of services that are moving up into the service layer and into the end-to-end network are going to even cause areas such as North America to have more opportunity for managed services. And certainly we see a combination of those trends playing out in Asia Pacific as well.
Excellent. Our final question is, what are services that are affected by the focus on customer experience metrics?
So, although there is interest at the C-level to deliver KBOs and have this end-to-end model, there was certainly a number of issues within the operations of service provider that make it difficult. The separation from the different departments in the operator, the lack necessarily of consolidated data, as I mentioned, the tool sets that can pull together that data to deliver the kinds of metric measurements that are required. The opportunities for the consulting and systems integrations organizations in the suppliers join with the managed services organizations and come in and say, we can structure this for you in this end value proposition and manage it for you in a way that will be valuable for the operator and the supplier. So it opens the door for some consultative selling and project and some integration in the software layers of operators in order to achieve the kinds of ongoing infrastructure and company support that an end-to-end managed services play would require.
So, and I want to thank everyone for your questions. We've really enjoyed our interaction with everyone today, and we're looking forward to continuing our dialogue with you. I'll leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes in case anyone has some last-minute questions that they want to get it under the wire. We'd like to off our presentation today with some information regarding the study that Michael covered, as well as other directly related research that may be of interest to you. If you'd like access to either the report that Michael just went through or any other reports that are listed here, I've left Michael's email address as well as our VP of Sales, James McElroy. You can reach out to them directly, and they'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your time.